How is it going, guys? Luke here, and welcome to another episode with some pot Limit Omaha content. In today's session, we're going to jump into the 5-card streets on GGPoker. I opened up 4 tables at PLO 100. We're going to see how the action is going. This is a session I recorded earlier today, so we're recapping what happened. It's not a live session. We're going to analyze some of the spots and share that with all of you. Obviously, 5-card PLO has become more and more popular over the past couple of years. So let's see what the hype and the action is all about. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also give the video a thumbs up if you do enjoy this specific video. Top left, we right away have a decision to make with ace, queen, 10, 5, 3, double suited. This is actually a hand that we prefer to call double suited pure because we have exactly 2 of each suit, and then we have 1 card which is unsuited. We have 3 Broadway cards and an ace, so I would say this is a pretty clear open raise, but we realize though that the small blind is very short, so we probably want to tighten up there for a little bit, but let's have a deeper look into this. Okay, let's take a look at what we are supposed to do with this specific holding using the 5-card PLO trainer. This is a software with pre-ran GTO solutions, both pre and post flop. And it helps you to understand better how you are supposed to play your entire range. Here you can see the button is supposed to raise 47% in a perfect GTO model. Again, this is with a small blind and a big blind that plays 100 big blind strategy. If we type in my specific holding, ace, queen, 10, 5, 3, we can see that this hand is a raise and it doesn't even matter what suit you have. So pretty much the connection and the high cards make this hand good enough to come in for the raise. Now, if we look into a 50 big blind solution, which we can also quickly open up, because the small blind is short, let's see what happens then. 35% of the time we are raising, so tighter. And a hand like ace, queen, 10, 5, 3 is still pretty much always a raise. There are a few folds now with the quad suited hands on the left and the rainbow version. But for the rest, we're just coming in for the raise all the time. So we do end up raising, which is the correct decision. Small blind, no surprise, comes in for the call. We flop the ace-high blocker and a gutter. I would say we're going to check. Not enough equity and blockers to force folds or willing to stack off. We do turn an ace, which is pretty good. Now, let's just pot it, I would say, and deny equity. Try to get the hand over with. Luckily, my opponent folds, which is good. We're taking it down. Bottom left, Jack 10, 9, 9, 3, double suited pure again. This is also a hand that we want to raise, I would say. In the small blind, we're pretty much playing a raise or fold strategy, and my hand is good enough to do that with. Not a great flop for my hand, and also a board where we're going to do a good amount of checking with my entire range. So I did end up checking and check folding versus that bet. Bottom right could be interesting to quickly look into as well. We have 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. A pure rundown, but very low. And we have 3 of the same suit. So let's take a look whether or not this hand is actually supposed to be a play. Let's have a look at the small blind strategy. We're raising 33.5%. Only a few calls by limping 4.8 and the rest we are folding. We can go to the categories and understand more about our category in specific, which is an unpaired hand, first of all. We're single suited, so we're going to open up this bucket and you can see that we have like different sub-levels below it. If we then open up the 5-card pure rundown, which is the 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. If we open that up, you can already see that there is a bunch of folding 59% of the time and only 36% of the time we are supposed to raise. If we look into the hands which our hand belong into, or if we look into the category, we can see that single suited nut suit, it's not what we have. Single suited non-nut suit, also not. We have a triple suited non-nut suit hand, basically. So it's this category. We're going to click on the filter icon and then opening up this specific group of hands. You can see that on the right side, the ones that we are raising are the ones with an ace and a bunch of Broadway cards, first of all. So let's say we remove an ace and a king and a queen and a jack. Let's see what happens. So we're looking at the low hands only. You can see that we're basically folding all of these combinations, right? Like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 trip suited is basically the bottom of our raising range, and therefore it makes sense that my hand is actually supposed to be a fold pre-flop. I did end up raising, which we now know is a mistake. The flop is 3-3 deuce rainbow. On this board, I would expect us to do a good amount of checking, just because 3-3 deuce is connecting quite well also with a wide big blind defending range. But let's take a look if we can learn anything about this post-flop situation. So here we are back in the 5-card PLO trainer, and as you can see, we now also have post-flop solutions in our software. And for small blind versus big blind single raise pot, we also have a selection of flops available, and one of the flops is 4-4 deuce rainbow, which is pretty similar to the board in question we were looking at in my hand. And I already was under the assumption that we're going to do a lot of checking. And if you look into this specific situation, you can see that we're only betting 5% as the out of position player and checking 95%. So it doesn't really matter, therefore, what hand I have or don't have. Realize that your range is going to primarily do a bunch of checking, and if the frequency is that much close, or that close basically to 0%, then I think it's completely fine to just check your entire range. You can also go to the buckets if you work with this tool, and we have basically automated buckets. Strength buckets is how we call them in the software, that allows you to break down your range post-flop and understand patterns much better. So you can see, for example, that quads are 12% of the time a bet. A full house is basically 97% of the time a check. A trip send, 89% of the time a check, and then 11% bet. And you can then even open up a bucket and dive deeper into it, because we are separating different components within each bucket. And that helps you to understand the principles and patterns even better. So for example, trips with a straight draw, 12% of the time, that hand is a bet. You can filter for it, click on the filter icon, and now the software will load only that specific part of your range. And that allows you to now, for example, jump into trips with a straight draw, and then see, okay, what are the hands within trips and a straight draw that are supposed to be a bet. You can see 12% of the time we're betting. For example, a hand like ace jack, 6-4-3 apparently is a bet there. Let's go back to the hand in question. We already know the pre-flop raise is not good. We are supposed to fold. We check call the flop, which I think is completely fine. Now on the turn, we make a straight. We check, my opponent checks back, which indicates that he probably doesn't have a boat at this point. The 8 is not necessarily a card on the river he's going to connect with very strongly, I would say. So I think on the river, I can come in for a small block bet, trying to get some value maybe from either 3x or an ace, and that way put a little bit of money into the pot. My opponent folds though, and we do pick up the hand. And in the meantime, let's move on to table number 3, bottom left, where we did open raise ace, jack, 3 deuce, double suited pure on the button. I would say this is definitely a hand that we can open raise with. We have a high pair and an ace. We have a double suited hand. So based also on what we saw earlier, I would assume this is a pure raise. Now let's understand the flop a little bit better. We flop top pair, a gutter, and we have a jack high flush draw. I would say this is a hand that could go either way, but generally speaking, I prefer to check because we don't really have nuttiness. And in case my opponent check raises, we're not that happy really. We can definitely get the money in. Also because he's pretty short, but at the same time, like, my opponent's check raising range will heavily focus on like 2 pairs and better, and also pair plus better flush draw, so we can get dominated quite easily. Okay, so I opened up a ace 6-5 two-tone board. The ace is suited here, and it's not exactly the same board, obviously, but we can get a little bit of better understanding about the situation. This is a button versus big blind node. You can see that the button is supposed to c-bet around 55% of the time. And a hand that we had was like, we had like ace, jack, 3 deuce. And the board was ace 7-5. So let's just start off by looking into ace, jack, 3 deuce. That also has a flush draw. To understand a little bit like what we are supposed to do with this specific combination. And you can see that we are actually going to check back a lot. Like with the jack high flush draw, which is what we had, we are supposed to check back 94% of the time. And I think the reason for checking back if the ace is unsuited, it is even larger because now we can also face the ace high suit basically. So I would assume that my check back is pretty good on this board, even though we have a lot of additional components to it. Again, you have these different buckets and you can see, okay, sets are supposed to bet 85% of the time. What are the sets, for example, that we want to slow play? Top set 15% of the time. Top set with a flush draw 20% of the time. So the more additional components you have, the more often you want to check back. Let's filter for top set with a flush draw to understand how are we supposed to play this specific bucket and see if we can find any patterns behind it. And if you look into the checking frequency, ace, king 8-7, for example, top set with an open-ended straight draw and a nut flush draw and a backdoor nut flush draw, like you're basically completely crushing the board. That hand is better off checking back, as you can see, because the likelihood of getting action is just so little. One other thing that I think is fun to show all of you guys before moving on is that if you click on the train filter icon on the bottom, you can actually do a lot of training for post-flop. And this allows you to practice a lot of hands and test yourself on either your entire range or on a specific bucket. Okay, so let's see what happens here. It's loading a little bit. So here we're back and we now filtered for only training top set basically with a flush draw. And we can see what we learned basically. So top set with a jack high flush draw, a backdoor flush draw gutter. I would say this is just a hand that we're going to bet, which is good. Top set, this is also a hand that we want to bet. Here we have top set and a nut flush draw and a middle pair blocker. Like this could be one of those hands that we are going to slow play. Also because we have the 7 blocking some of my opponent's straight draws. So checking could make sense. And apparently it's good. You can also see the correct actions in the result window and also the EV for both of the lines basically. This is definitely a hand we want to bet, I would say. This is pretty close. Top set, nut flush draw, backdoor nut flush draw, but we unblock all the pairs on the board. We also unblock most of the straight draws, so I would think we're still going to bet. But you can see again that this hand is supposed to be a check back. If you go to the range and, for example, type in, we have the king of hearts in our hand. You can see 48% of the time we have top set in this specific combination, and we're checking back if we have the nut flush draw. Okay, I hope this illustrates a little bit better. Important to realize for every situation is that we have a set of flops available. So if you click on the flop in specific, you can see that we have a list of 50 flops available for different scenarios in the game. So for example, button versus big blind. There are 50 flops now available that you can use, and you can use the filter icon on the top left to filter, for example, for straight boards that are rainbow. And then you can see, okay, button big blind, we have 4 rainbow straight flops you can work with. Let's continue with the footage. I decided to check back bottom left, which we learned is the correct play. Turn, I think we can go either way, really. I decided to check back and induce a bluff on a later street or on the river, basically, by my opponent. I think it's pretty hard to get value at that point either. Check back ranges or double checking ranges generally pretty weak. So getting value there is not that likely, in my opinion. Possible still, of course. He does come in for a river bet, and we have a clear call at that point. Let's see what my opponent shows up with. And he ended up bluffing with the 9 of spade blocker. And yeah, we pick up 5 additional big blinds on the river by checking back the turn. Bottom right, in the meantime, the money did go in. I can see we were 3-betting double suited aces, and we're losing against kings. Unfortunately, bottom right, king, king, jack, 9, 5. I would say pretty close, but we have 3 short stackers behind. So I don't mind tightening up a little bit there and folding my specific combination. Top left, we flop, middle set, and a top set blocker. So a very good board, obviously, or a very good situation for my hand, I would say. We don't have any redraws, really, which is in 5-card PLO. Could be problematic. I still think we want to just shove it. Also to deny equity from the early position player. If we call, we give Magnus Court easier time to call as well with some draws. And now forcing him out of the pot. My opponent, very wide and weak holding. Not a hand you want to cold call with pre-flop. And we end up splitting, apparently, by both making a straight on the river. Bottom left, we do defend. I think that is fine, really. We have a double suited hand. We have some connection. We have the ace-high suit against the button range. Flop and turn go check, check. And on the river, we have a 10. Pretty low showdown value, I would say, at this point. And we do have two blockers, right? We have the ace and the 9 blocking ace-queen and blocking queen-9. So in-game, I thought this was a decent hand to come in for a bluff, therefore, trying to fold out, for example, a jack or a weak king. But maybe I overestimated my blockers. And maybe the threshold in 5 cards should go up. I'm not entirely sure, but we still have 2 blockers, obviously. But my opponent ended up calling with the nuts. And I'm losing the pot. Obviously, the likelihood of him having ace-queen or queen-9 is still pretty high, I would say. Especially in that situation after him checking back flop and turn. Yeah, and I think that's going to wrap up the session for today, guys. A quick introduction into 5-card PLO. Also showing you what is available in the 5-card PLO trainer. A lot of post-flop solutions have been added. So check it out if you want to learn more about it. Or feel free to send me a message either below in the comment section or on our Discord channel. If you want to learn more about the specific software. The link below in the comment section or the link below can bring you right away to more information about our software, about the 5-card PLO trainer. So check that out if you want to learn more about it. And of course, subscribe to the channel. Give the video a thumbs up if you did enjoy this specific content. Over and out, guys. See you soon. GG.